My name is Henry James. I'm 73 years old. For over 7 decades, I've lived in the world, breathed its air, watched its seasons turn, and learned something fundamental about what it means to be alive, thrive. Something that, for most of my life, I failed utterly to understand. Not because I wasn't trying, not because I was ignorant, and not because I lacked ambition or intelligence to know it, but because I believed the wrong things for far too long. We are told from the beginning that life is linear. Go to school, get a job, build a home, raise a family, retire someday. We are taught that if we check the boxes, life is won. But the truth I discerned more, and it took me 52 years to see it clearly, it's something much deeper, much more nuanced, and much more transformative.
I'm 73 years old. For over 7 decades, I've lived in the world, breathed its air, watched its seasons turn, and learned something fundamental about what it means to be alive. Something that, for most of my life, I failed utterly to understand. Not because I wasn't trying, not because I was ignorant, and not because I lacked ambition or intelligence, but because I believed the wrong things for far too long. We are told from the beginning that life is linear. Go to school, get a job, build a home, raise a family, retire someday. We are taught that if we check the boxes, life is won. But the truth I discerned, and it took me 52 years to see it clearly, is something much deeper, much more nuanced, and much more transformative. Firstly, the illusion of one right way. From childhood through early adulthood, I bought into the idea that there was one right path to life, and that if I could just find it, everything else would fall into place. We don't talk about it, but this belief is everywhere. In the curriculum we're given at school, in the careers people praise, in the milestones people advertise on social media, in the assumptions others make about what success looks like. So I chased that path. I worked hard. I played by the rules. I pursued promotions and climbed every ladder that was placed before me. But here's the thing. Success, as defined by society, doesn't guarantee fulfillment. I watched many people sprint toward it with everything they had, yet when they arrived, they found themselves exhausted, distracted, or worse, empty. And that's because they were chasing the shape of someone else's life instead of the substance of their own. This was my first real lesson. There isn't one correct life blueprint. There's only the truth you discover for yourself through experience. Secondly, the blindness of youth. When we are young, we have boundless energy and astonishing optimism. We believe in possibility. We believe in our own immortality. We believe that mistakes are merely inconveniences and that time itself is a resource that can be endlessly borrowed. And because of that, we underestimate consequences and overestimate time. I learned this the hard way. There were decisions I assumed wouldn't matter. Choices like how I spent my evenings, how I handled conflict, how I treated people who couldn't repay me, how I talked to myself inside my own head. At the time, they felt insignificant. But looking back now, I see how they shaped the architecture of the rest of my life. Every choice creates a ripple. Every habit becomes a pattern. And every pattern ultimately becomes your character. Youth teaches us courage, but it doesn't teach us wisdom. Wisdom only comes with time. Thirdly, the first real treasure, self-awareness. One of the most profound realizations that came to me, not at 22, not at 32, but at 52, was this: what you think about yourself matters far more than what others think of you. For decades, I sought validation from external sources, from titles, from applause, from approval. I learned that People praise you for what they want from you. People respect you for what you provide. People judge you based on their own insecurities. But none of that tells you who you really are. Real self-worth comes from knowing yourself intimately. Your strengths, your faults, your fears, your values, your boundaries. Self-awareness is the compass that shows you whether the life you're living is your life or someone else's idea of what your life should be. And this self-awareness is not something you acquire overnight. It accumulates bit by bit with reflection, with failure, with humility, with quiet moments when you sit alone and face your own thoughts honestly. Fourth, the trap of comparison. Comparison is a silent thief. It doesn't shout, it whispers, quietly suggesting that someone else's life is better, easier, more meaningful, more successful. It creeps in. When you scroll on your phone, when you replay your doubts at night, when you evaluate your journey using someone else's map. Here's the brutal truth. You cannot compare your beginning to someone else's middle. A life isn't a scoreboard. It's a story, a long, winding journey that makes sense only when you stop measuring it against others. When I finally understood this, truly understood it, a vast weight lifted off my shoulders, and I began to live without constantly checking how others were living. So before we go deeper, let me ask you this. Do you feel like you're living your own life? Or are you living a life shaped by others' expectations? Because that question, more than any career choice, relationship, or success metric, determines the quality of your life. If there is one word that follows you quietly as the years pass, it is regret. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, not the kind that announces itself with tears and breakdowns, but the subtle kind, the kind that shows up late at night when the world is quiet and your mind is loud. Regret doesn't scream, it replays. 5 Why regret exists at all. For most of my life, I believed regret was something to avoid, a sign of failure, weakness, or poor judgment. I was wrong. Regret exists for a reason. It is not there to punish you. It is there to wake you up. Regret is proof that you have grown past an earlier version of yourself. It means you now see more clearly than you did before. But here's the danger. Most people don't learn from regret. They drown in it. They replay what they should have said, what they should have done, who they should have left, who they should have loved better. They mistake regret for condemnation instead of instruction. The truth is this: regret is only destructive when it's ignored or romanticized. 6. The regrets that haunt the elderly. When you reach your later years, you begin to notice something unsettling. People rarely regret the risks they took. They regret the risks they didn't take. I've sat beside hospital beds. I've attended funerals. I've listened to people confess truths they never shared when they were strong. And the regrets sound remarkably similar. I stayed in a life that made me small. I didn't say what needed to be said. I worked too much and lived too little. I loved too cautiously. You almost never hear, "I wish I had played it safer." That realization alone should change how you live. 7. Time is not fair, and that's the point. When you're young, time feels infinite. When you're old, it feels precise. You stop thinking in decades. You start thinking in moments. And that's when the cruel truth becomes obvious. Time doesn't slow down for clarity. It moves forward whether you're ready or not. This is why waiting for the right moment is one of the most dangerous habits you can form. There is no perfect time to start living honestly. There is only now and later. And later is never guaranteed. 8. The cost of postponed joy. I postponed joy for decades. I told myself I'll rest when things settle. I'll travel when I retire. I'll be happy when I've earned it. But joy doesn't work like a reward system. Joy is not something you unlock after suffering long enough. Joy is something you practice, or it disappears. I learned, painfully, that joy neglected eventually turns into resentment, and resentment is far heavier to carry than effort. 9. What you can still change, here's the good news, and it matters deeply. As long as you are alive, regret can still be transformed. You may not undo the past, but you can stop repeating it. You can apologize, even if it's late. Forgive, even if they don't deserve it. Leave, even if it's uncomfortable. Begin, even if you feel behind. The only true tragedy is learning the lesson and refusing to apply it. If your life ended in 10 years, not today, not tomorrow, what would you deeply wish you had started now? Hold that answer carefully, because that answer is pointing directly at your next chapter. There was a time in my life when I believed being busy meant being important. My calendar was full. My phone never stopped ringing. My days blurred together in a constant rush of responsibility, obligation, and motion. And I told myself the same lie millions of people still tell themselves today. This is what a meaningful life looks like. But busyness is not meaning. Busyness is often just distraction wearing a respectable uniform. 10. How busyness becomes a hiding place. Busyness is convenient. It gives you an excuse not to sit still, not to reflect, not to confront the uncomfortable questions. When you're busy, you don't have to ask, am I happy? Am I becoming the person I admire? Is this life aligned with my values? You can tell yourself you'll think about it later, but later becomes years. Years become decades. And one day you wake up wondering where your life went. 11. The moment I realized I was running from myself, I remember the exact moment clarity hit me. I was sitting alone in my car after work, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. I wasn't tired from effort. I was tired from avoidance. I had been running, not toward something meaningful, but away from silence. Because silence forces honesty, and honesty demands change. That moment didn't transform my life overnight, but it cracked the illusion. 12. The difference between a full life and a busy one. A full life is intentional. A busy life is reactive. A full life asks, what matters most? A busy life asks, what's next? The tragedy is that most people answer what's next for so long that they never ask what matters. Meaning requires space, and space requires the courage to say no. 13. The power of fewer commitments. One of the greatest lessons I learned far too late is this. Every yes costs you something: time, energy, attention, presence. When you say yes to everything, you end up giving nothing, your full self. It took me 50 years to understand that boundaries are not selfish. They are protective. They guard what little time you truly have. 14. Why most people live on autopilot? Autopilot feels safe. You wake up, you work, you consume, you sleep, repeat. No deep questions, no uncomfortable truths. But autopilot slowly erodes your sense of agency. You forget that you are allowed to choose differently. You forget that your life is not a prison sentence. It is a series of decisions, and decisions can be changed. Comfort is seductive. It doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't threaten you. It doesn't feel dangerous. It whispers. It tells you that you deserve rest, that you've worked hard enough, that change can wait, that staying where you are is reasonable. And before you realize it, comfort has quietly replaced your courage. 15. When familiarity masquerades as happiness. For years, I thought I was content. I wasn't miserable. I wasn't suffering. I wasn't desperate. So I assumed I was happy. But comfort and happiness are not the same thing. Comfort is the absence of discomfort. Happiness is the presence of meaning. You can be comfortable and deeply unfulfilled at the same time. I was 16. The fear disguised as practicality. Fear rarely announces itself as fear. It disguises itself as logic. It says things like, "This isn't the right time. I have responsibilities. I can't risk what I've built. Other people depend on me." And sometimes those things are true, but often they are simply fear wearing the mask of responsibility. I stayed in situations that drained me because leaving felt risky, not dangerous, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity terrified me more than unhappiness. 17. The moment comfort cost me something irreplaceable. There was a moment, a single moment, when I realized comfort had cost me something I could never recover. It wasn't dramatic. No explosion, no argument, no crisis. Just a quiet realization that years had passed while I was waiting for courage to feel convenient. And courage never does. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is movement despite fear. 18. Why people wait too long. People wait because they think clarity comes before action. It doesn't. Clarity comes from action. You don't feel ready, then change. You change, and then readiness follows. This is one of the cruelest misunderstandings of life. 19. Comfort is not evil, but it must be questioned. Comfort has its place. Rest matters. Stability matters. Safety matters. But comfort must be examined regularly. You must ask, is this supporting my growth or preventing it? Is this nourishing me or numbing me? Am I choosing this or hiding in it? A question you shouldn't ignore. What part of your life are you tolerating simply because it's familiar? And what might it be costing you? For most of my life, I believed strength meant endurance. You push through. You keep going. You don't complain. You don't dwell. That's what I was taught. And so I learned to ignore pain instead of understanding it. What no one tells you is this: pain that isn't faced doesn't fade. It hardens. 20. Emotional avoidance is not healing. Avoidance feels productive. You stay busy. You distract yourself. You tell yourself you're handling it. But avoidance is not resilience. It is postponed. Every emotion you refuse to process waits patiently and then finds another way out. Through anger, through bitterness, through withdrawal, through illness, through regret. The cost of suppressed emotions. I didn't realize how much emotional weight I was carrying until my body started breaking under it. Tension in my shoulders, restlessness in my sleep, a quiet irritability I couldn't explain. My mind was exhausted, not from thinking too much, but from holding too much in. Unexpressed grief does not vanish. It becomes part of you. Why we avoid pain in the first place. We avoid pain because it threatens the image we have of ourselves. Facing pain means admitting we were hurt, we were disappointed, we were afraid, we were vulnerable, and vulnerability feels like weakness. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is honesty without armor. The day I stopped running, there came a day when distraction stopped working. No noise was loud enough. No task was absorbing enough. I had to sit with myself, fully, quietly, honestly, and in that stillness, memories surfaced, regrets, losses, words unsaid. It was painful, but it was also cleansing, because pain acknowledged begins to loosen its grip. Processing is not dwelling. This is important. Processing emotion does not mean living in it. It means allowing it space so it doesn't control you from the shadows. You don't drown by stepping into water. You drown by pretending the water isn't there. For most of my life, I introduced myself by what I did. My work, my role, my responsibilities, and without realizing it, I tied my worth to my usefulness. When I was productive, I felt valuable. When I slowed down, I felt uneasy. This belief shaped my entire adult life and nearly hollowed me out. How productivity became identity. Somewhere along the way, we are taught a dangerous lesson. You earn your place in the world by being useful. So we chase productivity. We measure our days by output, not presence. And slowly, subtly, we begin to believe that rest must be justified, that existing is not enough. What happens when the work stops? Here's the part no one prepares you for. There will come a day when you can't do what you once did. Retirement, illness, age. And if your identity is built on productivity, that day feels like a rasher. I saw it happen in myself and in others. Men and women who had built entire identities around being needed suddenly felt invisible. Not because they had lost value, but because they had never defined the value beyond work. The quiet crisis of self-worth. I remember asking myself quietly, if I stop doing, who am I? It was a frightening question because I didn't have an answer. I had spent decades becoming efficient, not introspective, accomplished, but not deeply known to myself. Worth is inherent, not earned. This was one of the hardest truths to accept. Your worth is not something you prove. It is something you possess. You don't earn dignity through exhaustion. You don't justify your existence through achievement. You are valuable because you are human, not because of what you produce. Learning to be present without performing. Learning to sit still without feeling guilty was uncomfortable. Learning to rest without explaining myself was harder. But presence, true presence, does not require justification. It requires permission. Permission you must give yourself.